Michael J. Fox nearly died on the set of Back to the Future Part 3. The scene called for Marty McFly to be hanged, a tense moment meant to shock the audience. At first, Fox stood on a hidden platform, keeping the rope loose, but the director thought it looked too fake. Determined to make the scene real, Fox agreed to go without the platform, using only his hand to keep the rope from tightening around his neck. On the third take, he miscalculated. The noose cinched shut, cutting off blood flow to his brain. He dangled lifeless for several seconds, his face turning blue, while cameras kept rolling. Crew members thought he was just acting, until Robert Zemeckis realized something was wrong and screamed for them to cut him down. The quick reaction saved Fox's life, yet this terrifying moment was only part of a larger story. Behind the Hollywood spotlight, Fox was hiding a private struggle that would prove far deadlier than any movie stunt. Michael Andrew Fox was born on June 9, 1961, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to parents who came from two very different worlds. His father, William, was a tough career soldier in the Royal Canadian Corps of Signals, a man defined by discipline, duty, and order. His mother, Phyllis, worked as a payroll clerk, but carried with her a quiet love for movies and acting, a creative spark that often balanced out the rigid military structure of their home. From the very beginning, Michael's life was shaped by this push and pull between order and imagination, strict rules, and endless curiosity. But stability was never part of his childhood. As an army brat, he was constantly uprooted. His father's career meant the family moved again and again, from Edmonton to Chilliwack to North Bay, sometimes packing up before Michael had even settled into school. By the time he was a teenager, he had lived in 5 different cities. The constant change forced him to adapt quickly. He learned to read people fast, to find humor as a way to make friends, and to deflect trouble before it found him. Being the new kid wasn't easy, but it gave him a survival skill he would carry forever: charm. In 1971, after 25 years in uniform, William retired from the military. For the first time, the Fox family finally planted roots in Burnaby, British Columbia. Michael was just 10 years old, and for once, he had a chance to feel settled. Burnaby became the place where his personality took shape, where he discovered who he really was. Like many Canadian boys, Michael first dreamed of the ice. Hockey wasn't just a pastime, it was the national obsession. And Michael idolized stars like Bobby Orr. He spent hours practicing, giving everything he had to the game. But there was one problem. His body betrayed him. While his teammates grew taller and stronger, Michael stayed small, topping out at just 5'4". The NHL dream slipped away as reality sank in. No matter how hard he worked, his size would hold him back. It was devastating, a heartbreak that forced him to look elsewhere for meaning. And that's when a surprising new path opened. Michael had always loved music. He taught himself to play guitar and performed in garage bands with friends, dreaming of maybe making it as a musician. But everything shifted when he stumbled into drama class at school. It was 1976, and a teacher immediately noticed his quick wit and natural comedic timing. Encouraged to audition for a role in a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation sitcom, Michael discovered that the very thing that killed his hockey dream, his small size, was suddenly his greatest advantage. The show, Leo and Me, needed someone who could pass for a 10-year-old boy. At 15, Michael Fox walked into the audition and landed the role. It wasn't just a small part, it was the first step on a path that would take him from Burnaby to Hollywood, from a struggling teenager to one of the most recognizable faces in the world. But in those early days, no one could have guessed just how much his size, his charm, and his determination would define the rest of his life. When Michael landed the role on Leo and Me at just 15 years old, it was a revelation. The sitcom, filmed in Vancouver, wasn't a global hit, but for Michael, it was a lifeline. He was suddenly earning real money, enough to feel independent, enough to taste the freedom that acting could bring. The producers were surprised at his natural timing. He had never studied acting formally, yet he carried himself like someone who belonged on screen. The show only ran for 2 seasons, but it gave Michael something far more valuable than a paycheck. It gave him confidence. He realized that acting wasn't just a fun distraction, it could be a career. Between 1978 and 1979, his name began to circulate in Canada. Casting directors started asking for him specifically, a rare honor for someone his age. He appeared in small television films such as Letters from Frank, where he played a troubled teenager coping with his father's alcoholism. He was making about $1,500 an episode. No small sum for a teenager in the late 1970s. By 17, magazines in Canada were labeling him a rising star, but the real turning point came when he stepped onto the stage. In 1979, Michael joined the Vancouver production of The Shadow Box, a Pulitzer Prize-winning play that dealt with death, grief, and the fragility of life. Michael, only 18, played Mark, a young man dying of cancer. Surrounded by older, seasoned actors, he was forced to rise to the challenge. He worked 8 shows a week for little pay, just $200 a week, but what he gained was priceless. Critics praised his vulnerability and emotional honesty, qualities they didn't expect from someone so young. For the first time, Michael understood acting not just as entertainment, but as art. It demanded every ounce of honesty he could give, and he gave it. That same year, Michael faced a crossroads. Offers were coming in from Canadian television, including a chance to star in a new series that would have paid $2,000 per episode for 22 episodes. A small fortune for someone just out of high school. But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that staying in Canada meant staying small. The real dream was south of the border. Against the advice of friends, and with only $500 in savings, he made a choice that would change his life forever. He left Canada for Los Angeles, determined to make it in Hollywood. His parents worried. His agent warned him, but Michael had already tasted success, and he was convinced that with enough persistence, he could carve out a place in the most competitive industry in the world. He rented a tiny studio apartment in West Hollywood for $200 a month. He survived on bologna sandwiches and discount cereal, often going hungry just to pay rent. It was a life of uncertainty. But for Michael J. Fox, it was also the beginning of everything. What he didn't know then was that Hollywood was about to test him in ways far harsher than he could ever imagine. Hollywood was not kind to Michael J. Fox in the beginning. By 1980, the city had already chewed through thousands of young hopefuls just like him, and he was quickly learning that talent alone wasn't enough. He landed a few auditions, but most ended in rejection. Casting directors told him he was too short, too young-looking, not leading man material. Agents stopped calling. By his second year in Los Angeles, his $500 savings were long gone. He owed thousands on credit cards, his phone was constantly at risk of being cut off, and his landlord threatened eviction more than once. For a stretch of time, he survived on little more than day-old bread. He later admitted he once went an entire week on just $150, stretching it out on cheap groceries while trying to keep his head above water. He even began selling his furniture piece by piece to cover rent. First a section of his couch, then another. Each time he got $50, just enough to buy himself a little more time. His first real film break came in 1980 with Disney's Midnight Madness. He played Scott Larson, a bratty college kid with only a few minutes of screen time. The job paid $2,000 for 2 weeks of work. A relief, but not nearly enough to dig him out of his financial hole. Worse, the movie flopped, earning less than its budget, and the phone didn't start ringing with new offers. He had beaten out 200 other hopefuls for that small part, but instead of launching him forward, it left him feeling stuck. Still, he clung to the hope that something bigger was coming. Around this time, he realized even his name was working against him. When he joined the Screen Actors Guild, he discovered another Michael Fox had already claimed the name. He couldn't use Michael A. Fox either, fearing headlines would mock him as Michael a Fox. So on December 1st, 1979, he officially became Michael J. Fox. The J didn't stand for anything in his own name. It was inspired by actor Michael J. Pollard from Bonnie and Clyde. That $100 name change fee was money he could barely afford, but it would soon become one of the most recognizable names in Hollywood. Still, the struggle was relentless. By 1982, he was $30,000 in debt, and on the verge of giving up entirely. He thought about going back to Canada, admitting defeat. The dream of Hollywood stardom seemed like a cruel joke, slipping further away each day. But then, in August of that year, as he stared down eviction and sold off the last of his belongings, the phone finally rang. On the other end was his agent, Bob Schulenberg, with the call that would change his life. Michael had been cast as Alex P. Keaton in a new NBC sitcom called Family Ties. In that moment, he went from the edge of failure to the brink of everything he had ever wanted. The phone call in August 1982 pulled Michael J. Fox back from the edge of collapse. He had been sleeping on a broken couch in his tiny West Hollywood apartment, surviving on little more than cereal and hope. Then came the news. He had landed the role of Alex P. Keaton on NBC's new sitcom Family Ties. It was a miracle at the last possible second. The paycheck alone, $5,000 per episode, meant survival. But no one, not even Michael, could have predicted how much that single role would transform his life. At first, Family Ties wasn't designed for him. The show's premise centered on liberal ex-hippie parents raising their children in the conservative 1980s. The focus was supposed to be on the parents, not the kids. But from the moment Michael stepped onto the set as Alex, the conservative teenage Republican with a briefcase and a sharp tongue, something clicked. Audiences couldn't get enough of him. His comedic timing, quick delivery, and boyish charm stole every scene. Within weeks, NBC executives realized they had a breakout star on their hands. But not everyone believed in him. Brandon Tartikoff, one of NBC's top executives, argued that Fox was too short, too plain, and not the kind of actor whose face could ever appear on a lunchbox. Michael never forgot the insult. Years later, after Family Ties turned him into a household name, he had a custom lunchbox made with his face on it and sent it directly to Tartikoff with a note that said, "This is for your crow." By 1983, Family Ties was pulling in more than 30 million viewers each week. Michael's character had become the centerpiece of the show, overshadowing the original stars. Audiences loved Alex P. Keaton's obsession with money, business, and politics, which reflected the Reagan-era America they were living in. Michael played him with such sincerity that even viewers who disagreed with Alex's politics found him lovable. Awards soon followed. From 1986 to 1988, Fox won 3 consecutive Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. In 1989, he added a Golden Globe. By his mid-20s, he had become one of television's most beloved and bankable stars. Off-screen, though, the workload was staggering. The success of Family Ties gave him instant credibility in Hollywood, but it also trapped him in a punishing schedule. He was desperate to expand beyond television and into films, but juggling both worlds was nearly impossible. When Back to the Future came calling in 1985, he had to film the sitcom during the day and the movie at night, running on just a few hours of sleep. The exhaustion nearly broke him, but the rewards were greater than he could have imagined. With one role on TV and another on the big screen, Michael J. Fox was about to become not just a star, but a cultural phenomenon. By late 1984, Michael J. Fox was already a household name thanks to Family Ties, but television wasn't enough for him. He wanted to prove he could carry films as well. The opportunity came in the most unexpected way. The role of Marty McFly in Back to the Future had already been cast. Eric Stoltz was chosen after his performance in Mask. But just weeks into filming, director Robert Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg realized something was off. Stoltz was talented, but his version of Marty was too dark, too serious. They needed someone lighter, funnier, more relatable. Against enormous resistance, they made the painful choice to fire Stoltz, costing the studio millions. And then they turned to Michael J. Fox. There was one major problem: his Family Ties schedule. NBC initially refused to release him, worried about losing their breakout star. But a compromise was struck. Fox would film the sitcom during the day and Back to the Future at night. It was brutal. From January to March 1985, Michael worked a schedule that would break most actors. He filmed Family Ties from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., then rushed across town to the Universal lot, where he shot Back to the Future until 2 or 3 a.m. On Fridays, the grind was even worse. 2 live tapings for the sitcom, then straight into all-night film shoots. Crew members sometimes had to carry him to his bed. He was so exhausted that he once mistook a film prop for equipment on the sitcom set, completely forgetting where he was. Yet through sheer willpower, he kept going. When Back to the Future finally premiered in July 1985, it became an instant cultural phenomenon. Made on a $19 million budget, it earned nearly $400 million worldwide and turned Michael into one of the most bankable stars of the decade. His Marty McFly was funny, relatable, and endlessly quotable. The DeLorean, Doc Brown, 1.21 gigawatts, and Great Scott became part of everyday language. Critics compared its timelessness to The Wizard of Oz. The film was so successful, it spawned 2 sequels, filmed back-to-back in the late 1980s. But with success came danger. On the set of Back to the Future Part 3, Michael filmed a scene in which Marty was hanged by a noose. After using a platform to fake the effect, Michael insisted on trying it without the support. On the 3rd take, the rope cut off blood flow to his brain. He dangled unconscious for several terrifying seconds until Robert Zemeckis screamed for the crew to cut him down. The quick action saved his life. Audiences never knew the danger behind that scene, but for Michael, it was another brush with mortality. One he could not have imagined foreshadowed a deeper battle still to come. Because just as he was conquering Hollywood, Michael J. Fox was about to face a diagnosis that would change his life forever. At the height of his fame, Michael J. Fox seemed unstoppable. He was the face of one of television's biggest sitcoms, the star of a billion-dollar film franchise, and the darling of Hollywood. But behind the cameras, something terrifying was happening to his body. In 1991, while filming Doc Hollywood, he noticed a small twitch in his left pinky finger. At first, he brushed it off as stress or fatigue from long hours on set, but the twitch didn't go away. Within months, it spread from his finger to his whole hand. Concerned, he visited a neurologist, expecting reassurance. Instead, at just 29 years old, Michael J. Fox was told he had young-onset Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder with no cure. The diagnosis was devastating. He had built a career on energy, timing, and physical expression, and now his own body was betraying him. Doctors told him he might have only 10 more years of meaningful work ahead. For a man not yet 30, it felt like a death sentence. But Michael wasn't ready to let the world know. He hid the truth from almost everyone, except his wife, actress Tracy Pollan, whom he had married in 1988. For the next 7 years, he kept the disease a secret, carefully crafting ways to disguise his symptoms on screen. He learned to time his medication with military precision, popping dopamine pills like candy to steady his movements during filming. He used coffee cups, props, and briefcases to hide his trembling hands. On set, he leaned against desks and walls, locking his body into positions that looked casual, but were really acts of control to keep the disease from showing. To fans, he still looked like the energetic star they adored. Inside, he was unraveling. The stress of hiding his condition weighed heavily on him. Alcohol became his escape. He later admitted that during those years he drank heavily, numbing himself against the fear of losing everything he had worked for. At his lowest, he would sit in a bathtub with his head under the water, wondering if he had the strength to keep going. His wife and children became his anchor, but even they could not shield him from the storm he faced inside. On screen, he kept working, starring in hits like The Frighteners in 1996 and continuing to charm audiences. But every role was a battle. Every public appearance required strategy, timing, and luck. For 7 long years, Michael lived a double life. Hollywood's golden boy by day, a man terrified of his own future by night. And the longer he kept the secret, the heavier it became. Eventually, the world would have to know. But when he finally revealed the truth, it would not end his career. It would redefine it. By the late 1990s, Michael J. Fox was running out of places to hide. The tremors had grown stronger, the stiffness harder to disguise, and the paparazzi cameras sharper than ever. Rumors began to swirl, whispers that something was wrong with him. On December 7, 1998, at just 37 years old, he decided to take control of the narrative. In a cover story for People magazine, Michael J. Fox revealed to the world that he had been living with Parkinson's disease for 7 years. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood. At the time, most people associated Parkinson's with the elderly, not with a young star in the prime of his career. The revelation could have destroyed him, but instead, it had the opposite effect. Fans, fellow actors, and strangers from around the world rallied around him. Letters poured in, stories of families affected by the disease, messages of encouragement, donations to research. Instead of pity, he received admiration. Michael's honesty broke the stigma wide open. Even as his health worsened, his career did not immediately end. In fact, he was still the lead on Spin City, the hit ABC sitcom he had launched in 1996. Before signing on, he had quietly told ABC President Robert Iger and DreamWorks co-founder Jeffrey Katzenberg about his diagnosis, warning them it could get bad. They told him to go forward anyway, and the gamble paid off. Spin City became a massive success, winning him 3 Golden Globes, an Emmy, and 2 Screen Actors Guild Awards. But by 2000, the toll was too great. He found himself gripping desks to keep steady during scenes, his body betraying him in front of the camera. On January 19, 2000, he announced he would leave the show at the end of the season. Castmates broke down in tears. Barry Bostwick openly wept in interviews. The audience gave him standing ovations during his final appearances. That same year, Michael J. Fox took his fight to a new battleground. At just 39, he founded the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. What began as one man's attempt to make a difference quickly grew into the largest private funder of Parkinson's research in the world. By bypassing bureaucracy and directly funding the most promising scientists, the foundation accelerated discoveries at a speed no government program could match. By 2023, it had raised more than $2 billion. In 2023, researchers funded by the foundation announced a breakthrough that many called the biggest advance since the 1960s, a test that could detect Parkinson's with over 90% accuracy even before symptoms began. For patients and families around the globe, it was a glimmer of hope. Michael's decision to reveal his truth had not just changed his own life, it had changed the future of Parkinson's research forever. But even as the foundation thrived, Michael's own health was in decline, and yet his story was far from over. What came next would define his legacy in ways no film role ever could. By the time Michael J. Fox stepped away from full-time acting in the early 2000s, he had already left an indelible mark on both entertainment and medicine. Most actors are remembered for their roles, but Michael became something more, a symbol of resilience, optimism, and the relentless fight for a cure. Even as his health worsened, he refused to disappear. Instead, he used his condition as fuel, weaving it into characters like Lewis Canning on The Good Wife, earning Emmy nominations for portraying a lawyer whose own medical quirks mirrored his struggles. In 2009, he hosted Adventures of an Incurable Optimist, a documentary special that took him across the world, searching for reasons to stay hopeful, proving his humor and warmth were unshaken. Beyond the screen, his writing cemented his voice. His memoirs, including Lucky Man and Always Looking Up, became bestsellers, with one audiobook even winning him a Grammy. Through his words, fans saw not just the star they once adored, but a man grappling with pain, faith, and acceptance. His honesty gave countless others the courage to face their own battles. Meanwhile, his foundation transformed the fight against Parkinson's. By 2023, It had raised over $2 billion, funding breakthrough research that changed the course of the disease. In 2025, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor. Standing at the White House, his hands unsteady but his voice firm, he shared the recognition with millions of patients and families still waiting for answers. Now in his 60s, Michael J. Fox admits life grows harder each day. He falls more often. His mobility is limited, yet he remains grateful, clinging to humor as both shield and sword. His wife, Tracy Pollan, continues to stand by him after nearly 4 decades of marriage, a partnership that has carried him through the darkest nights. When asked recently about his legacy, Michael said he never wanted to be remembered just as the boy who played Marty McFly, or even as the star of Family Ties. He wanted to be remembered as someone who showed people that even in struggle, there is joy to be found, hope to be shared, and purpose to be lived. For millions, that legacy is already written. Michael J. Fox didn't just play a time traveler on screen, he changed the future in real life.